Okay, I believe we're live. Welcome, everyone. This is Nogol Madani, the founder of Glee Factor and the host of Human Mode Conversations. This is our 30th episode. Basically, it's our final episode for season two. And I have the privilege to finish the season with Jennifer Johnston, who's the Chief of People Officer at Payworks. Jennifer, we had a privilege of working together on your summit, both in Montreal and Toronto. Do you want to just do a little bit of introduction about yourself and before we jump in?
Perfect. Absolutely, Nogo. Well, first, thank you so much for welcoming me to your conversations. I've had the chance to watch a few of them before, so we'll see how it goes today. And as you mentioned, we were thrilled to have you join part of our team earlier in the year to have some really excellent conversations. And so, hi everyone. I'm Jen Johnston. I am the Chief People Officer at Payworks. I've been with Payworks for just about 4 years. And prior to that, I had the opportunity and privilege to work with insurance companies as well as some larger global companies as well. All of my time has been spent in kind of the field of human resources. I have had the opportunity to bounce around a few areas in talent management, in organizational development, and of course, HR business partnerships and operations.
Awesome. Love it, Jen. Thank you so much. And I have to say to everyone that this is our last session. We tried our best to get this glitch out of my sound, but look like it is there. Jen, I try to talk less, basically.
No.
This is a good reason for me. So, we already had a conversation back in Toronto and also in Montreal about the future of leadership, what's going to look like for, we talked a lot about agency, we talked about the challenges people are facing, but also the great opportunity that we all have for building a different future. So I love these conversations because, first of all, it will expose people to leaders that I believe are future proof and we need to have more of, including yourself. But also through sharing your journey, I hope that we could get to bring some insights to the younger leaders so that they can build their own identity and capacity. So with that in mind, I always start a conversation with this question: that what does leadership mean to you, and how has it evolved throughout the years that you had this role?
Yeah, no, thanks, Nogol. And leadership, I feel like we all read so many things on what leadership is or what we think it should be or what we think we want to be. I think one of the first things is always kind of staying true to yourself. And, we talked a lot about, authenticity and being authentic to you in leadership. When I think back to what I thought leadership was, early days, just entering the workforce, and you look to those leaders, those were the ones that had the titles in the room, they held the room, they were the smartest person in the room. And I think to where I've seen that evolve, even from my own kind of thinking, is leadership is more of a collective identity sometimes. Like it takes more than one, it takes a team. When I look back on some of the incredible leaders that I've had amazing opportunities to learn from, and think to myself, oh my goodness, I hope that I can be more like that as I grow in my leader career. And I think what I always gleaned from those folks was their ability to know the business. Yes, your role and being a subject matter expert in your role, it's a loose term. I feel like, especially nowadays, I don't feel like I could be really an expert in too much. But really understanding business. And I think that's maybe where my MBA kind of came into play and assisted in some aspects. And I think one of the other pieces was less about leadership and really becoming a partner.
Hmm.
And so I think to kind of now how I view leadership and how it's transformed is it's less about the smartest person in the room, because I can tell you that rarely ever happens, surrounded by such incredible people. But being able to understand the business, be a partner, help to coach, so that you can just engage in really good conversations and have kind of that shared purpose and kind of collective vision for going forward.
Yeah, and I love it. And I have to say that and confirm that when I saw you, how you show up with your team, like I really felt that there is not definitely like, you are at a leadership position, but there's not that hierarchy. There's not that sense of authority and control, like that partnership to your point, like you see that it's there. And I
Yes.
think that it's extremely, extremely important. Um, that being said, like different people of different times of when they think that, okay, I think I'm a leader. Like what you shared that you learned a lot from the leaders that were around you. And that might happen even when people don't have the official title. Like what was that moment for you that you thought like, you know what, I think I'm a leader. Like I can have an impact. Like what was it? What was that moment like? And or is it just a gradual, like, idea?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and it brings a lot of reflection. And I would say a lot of my early career, I wasn't in a people leader role.
Hmm.
And a lot of the roles that I were in were an individual contributor, in which I was partnering with the business. And if I reflect on, when I truly felt that I was, a leader, or when I was kind of showing up, I think it was less about title, because I actually became a people leader later in my career than I would say. But what I had the opportunity to do, thanks to a wonderful leader network around me, is I was put into positions and given the opportunity to work on projects with others where I was working alongside senior leaders, whether we were, developing new programming, whether we were working on projects to implement technologies, to whether we were, looking at an entire new organizational structure to transform and getting, the opportunity to work along the executive team on that and then to deliver it and roll it out. And so I think when I go back to kind of, I'm not trying to say I'm, too fluffy or anything like that, but I don't know if it was necessarily ever a title. I truly think I learned about influencing and being a partner, and having a lot of fun along the way too. And like I mentioned, it was later in my career where I would say that I had teams, and then larger teams, and that if I look into kind of my role now. And so I think some of that advice to maybe those folks that are, building up their career, their journey, sometimes we can think we need to have a certain title to be there. But if you have folks around you where you can work on significant projects with scope, and there's so much opportunity right now in this kind of age of transformation that many of us in our organizations are going through, the opportunities can almost be endless. And
Yeah.
I think I go back to that gratefulness, right? I've just had so many incredible leaders that perhaps put me on projects and into work that I did not have the reps to do, Nogol. Like at times I remember thinking on some of them, oh my gosh, like how am I here? But I had folks that, saw something in me and were there to kind of champion. And did I get it right every time? No. And but they were there to kind of support and guide through.
And I love this idea, Jen, that you mentioning that you can have an influence and impact as an individual contributor. And obviously that was like, one of the topics that don't wait for the title, but also don't wait for your leaders to, to bring you something, like raise your hand, be out there. And to your point, there are many opportunities right now for us to have an influence and to raise their hand and somehow add value because of the transformations that we're going through. So I really love this idea because, so many people think that, but I'm not a leader material. Some people say, I just hear them say, but I'm a technical person. I'm not a leader material. It's like, what is exactly like leader material? Like if you are having an impact, if you can bring people together and convince them to follow you, to do a greater good and like meet a project and realize a project, then that's all that it's all about. And it's interesting because through this season we had people that when we said when did you think that you were a leader, they say I was 6 years old. And we had people that say that, what, I never raised my hand for anything, and I just became leader gradually. And I think that
Yeah.
that diversity is important for people to
Yes.
see that, like some of us born leaders, some of us become leaders. Like it's
Yeah.
really, it could be anywhere in that spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, and I'm sure you come across this as well as, when folks wherever you are in your career, there seems to be like this notion before, maybe that was earlier in career, where it's, like this ladder view. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to
Yeah.
become this role, and this role, I'm going to be senior role. And some things that I've learned and that I've spoken about with groups as well, is for me, it's more of like that lattice or that web. And I've definitely done that in my journey as well, where I have kind of moved sideways or even down, and moved into a different role, and it was some projects, and that led me there, or someone tapping me on the shoulder and says like, hey, this might be something really cool that I think you can do. And I remember, it'd be many years ago now, Nogol, in complete fairness, but when I was doing my master's, and we had a CEO week, and there were senior leaders from organizations that came in, and would just kind of talk about their career and their journey and give some
Mhm.
advice. And I remember one of them really stuck out, and they kind of described navigating your career as like pulling strings. You know what? Like, you're not quite sure what's going to happen. Be open to it. Surround yourself with good people. And when something comes up, like, just pull that next string and just see where it goes. And I don't know, for some reason, that one for, probably close to 20 years now, has really stuck with me. And I've kind of shared that example a little bit. And I think that's how I would describe a bit of the journey. And I know that can be daunting to some folks because you don't have a clear path. What's next? Or, I get folks, what do you think's next for me? Or what can I do next? And I always go, what inspires you? What do you have
Yeah.
fun doing? Fun's a big part of my world. I want to make sure that I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and that people around me are having fun too.
Exactly. And I love that string analogy, Jennifer, because I think that this is exactly where we are, most of us are at, with uncertainty and ambiguity that we're dealing with, that none of us know what's next. I think the best that you can do is to, pull a string and see where you land, what's the learning, and what are the next steps. And,
Yeah, like I had
really
an
just experiment.
example earlier in my career. I was loving the role that I was in, and had been spending some time building up a talent management function. Many of the roles that I took on were newer roles, and so it was an awesome opportunity because you get to kind of build and design and grow a team. And a large project, we were implementing some technology, and I was back maybe about 18 months from maternity leave, and similar to many folks, you're driven, you want to do well, you want to meet all the objectives, and I kind of got a little burnout. And at that time, I had had some conversations with my leaders, and I moved out of that role. I moved out of that role, and moved back into like an HR business partner, manager role, with another part of the organization. And it was the best decision ever that I did. And I wouldn't necessarily say it was a step down or lateral. It was the perfect place. There was that string that I needed to pull next, for both myself. And where it kind of led to is I got to work so closely, with the executive team kind of there, and build some new relationships and opportunities. COVID hit shortly after, Nogel. That presented its whole other
Yeah.
opportunities and lessons, and I'm sure that we're all going through right now, but wouldn't have changed it for the world. But I think at that time, it was scary, it was different, it was unknown.
Hmm.
You kind of wrestle with yourself personally, making the
Yeah.
right calls. And then, fast forward, I entered back into that kind of domain again, into an elevated role. So yeah, I think that string was meant to be pulled, I guess.
Actually very interesting that you mentioned, because I think that the idea of pushing ourselves constantly and like moving forward and trying our best, which is amazing, like it's the best thing that we can do, but also being realistic on like where we're at in our career and our personal lives and what would be that holistic approach. And I love the fact that, I'm sure it was not an easy decision for you, because it might have felt like, okay, that's not as fun. I'm going back to what I know, I'm going back to familiar rather than new, all of that. But now you sitting here and say that this was the best decision because then I could manage everything. And then I again went back to that, you know, that a role. Like, I think that this is extremely refreshing for younger people, that I guess sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to really stand out,
Hmm.
and I always mention that because one of our guests, Akanksha Malik from in Toronto, she mentioned something, said, I learned as a leader to not to impress, but to be useful. And I always use that because sometimes that usefulness, I think it's really for yourself, for your family, for the business. Like, it's better than like, this is not the time to impress. This is not the time to prove because I don't have that energy. And I
Yes.
love that gracious and, like look and approach to growth and to development, especially as a leader. I love that. So, like early on, one of the things that we hear a lot, Jen, that I share a lot is that people, when they start to become leaders or get these roles, they have this transition that is quite challenging.
Mm.
That I got promoted because I knew things, because I was a high performer, because I'm an expert. But now I'm a leader, so I have to be the one that gives space.
Yeah.
Like, how was that for you? How did that look like? Because this is exactly what you also define as leader, that they're the ones who hold space. They're the ones who teach people other things. They're coach. They're really good at coaching. We call it facilitative leadership. Like, what was that transition for you like?
Yeah, so I think very similar to, others, that transition to it, you're going into, leadership roles, and it's trying to move away a little bit from that doing, or having that aspect of exactly how you think it should be. And it really becomes more about coaching, influencing, building up, empowering. But it's not easy. And I would say even now in my role, I can struggle,
Mhm.
with that. And it was interesting, like, I think in early leadership roles was also stepping into roles where the role and the function was newer and it was being built up. So some of my earlier roles, there was still an aspect of doing. And I found,
Mhm.
as, grown into more senior leadership roles, that's where I found it's been more of a struggle, because then it really is more about that delegating and influence. And I feel like you reach this peak, where you all of a sudden realize there's no way that I'm going to be able to get everything done. And it's kind of like a little bit of that mental battle. Be like, okay, like I can't do all those things. Let's be real with myself. And I've also, been so fortunate to have such incredible teams around that I've been able to hire and work with, and be there. And I always remember thinking, like, I had leaders who trusted and empowered me. And I think that's how I want people to feel around me as well. And so that's not always easy. That's easy for someone to say, but that's not always easy. And I think one of the things that I try to regularly say in conversations is, what do you feel you're accountable for? Using
Mhm.
like a RACI framework, I find benefits. Which is where you establish by activities and roles who's responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, just for those on the call to know what RACI is. And that helps as well to really understand, where am I playing, or why am I doing things that maybe I shouldn't. And so
Mhm.
that people really feel that they have the ability to kind of be in their own lanes to get it done. But
Wow.
yeah, to go back to your question on what was probably the struggles, it was really around that delegation to move more into influence, which I'm sure is such a standard answer you have for someone. And
Yeah.
I would
No,
say
but
even to
it
now,
is a
that can be
challenge. But
difficult.
it's a challenge. And,
Yeah.
like what I'm hearing constantly is that you get promoted to this certain position because of your performance, because of your voice, because of your expertise. And understanding or recognizing this idea that this is what brought you here, but it might not be what will, help you in this phase,
Yes. Yeah.
and that you have to learn other skill sets. It is not easy. Like, I'm hearing
No.
from people a lot that, but if I give voice to others, am I going to lose my voice? Because this is very, and it's a very human, I think, question to
Yeah.
ask, that, okay, like now all of a sudden I have to enable others rather than being the, superstar and the hero of the team. Like, how is that even possible? So, what are some of this? So tell me, John, what are some of those practices that helped you gradually, make this shift from the doer to enabler, delegator, and,
Yeah.
someone who empowers others?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things is again surrounding yourself with a solid team.
Yes.
And knowing that you've got folks here that are here for a reason, and they want to do good work as well. So I think that was the first thing, and then being really clear on who owns what and who's responsible
Yeah,
for what,
very
so that we know
powerful.
what our roles
Mhm.
are. And then, trying to on a regular basis just talk about like the development and the conversations. And I know, I'm definitely speaking to someone who's very well versed in this area, but creating that psychological safety so then folks can be honest when they don't have the reps to do something and have a couple of questions, and can talk about how they're feeling about the work. But I think that's one of the biggest things, making sure that you're surrounding yourself with good people, and I've been fortunate to have that, and people that will also recognize that you don't need to have all the answers. So
Yes.
I think it's years ago, and it was a piece of Gartner research, but they spoke about and kind of introduced like this notion of connector managers. And that one I think landed very well for me. And I think it's so true today, because today there's no way that you can be the smartest person in the room and that you need to know it all to be able to do the team. Because I can tell you, especially with AI and some things, there are folks that are like light speed ahead of me, and I can spend some time kind of catching up. But I've always liked this notion of being a connector manager, and that you don't need to know everything, but your role is to help connect the pieces for those folks that are on your team, or connect them to someone who may know the answer. And I think being comfortable enough to say like, oh, I'm not sure either, but I heard, that so and so has been reading this, or they've done something. Go reach out to them, and oh, when you do, bring it back because I want to know too, right?
I love this. It's interesting because we constantly talk about this idea that, we shared it also during like the summit, that it's all around connecting the dots and making sense of things that are happening. And as some of our guests mentioned, becoming an interpreter or translator of the complexity, because the things are complex now. So even if you can just, and I love what you mentioned about clarity, because I think that, like we discuss about this thing, that lack of clarity is something that kills psychological safety. But what you
Mm,
shared also that it was interesting is that clarity in our roles and in our responsibilities. And
yes.
that combined with that psychological safety to be able to say that this is working or this is not working. I think that can, because I remember sitting back in a cubicle doing things that I was really not supposed to do, but I felt that I have to figure this out because it's given to me. And I
Yeah.
didn't have necessarily that confidence, or that, like, I didn't feel safe to take the risk and discuss it with
Yeah.
higher management. So I can definitely relate to that, that if we have clarity around roles, responsibilities,
Mm.
what we are accountable for, that could already build that solid team that is constantly proactive in terms of what's working and what's not.
Yeah. No,
I love that.
absolutely agree.
I love
Yeah.
that. So, another thing, Jen, that I hear a lot is from younger leaders is that I think that they're living in a world that they think that they need to. There's a little unlearning happening because we see that the systems that are breaking, the leadership that is not working in our political lives and our, like, everyday lives and cities. So I think that I always tell younger people that, like, go after what you want to build and who you want to become as a leader, but the first step is that who you don't want to become as a leader. So what were some of the things that you thought that, okay, I don't want to be this, I need to unlearn this is something that I somehow inherited or read, or I thought that it would be helpful, but down the line I thought that no, it's not serving anymore, or at least it's not serving me as a leader. Like, what were some of that?
Oh gosh, like some of the things that would kind of unlearn. If we go back to, we've chatted a little bit about, some previous notions of what we thought leadership was, right? And leadership was, you know, uh, being that loudest voice in the room or having all the answers. And I think right now where this is also just becoming front and center. And I think regardless of where you might be in your leadership journey, it may resonate. It's resonating for me. But especially in the face right now with AI and the transformation that's coming. Um, you to be the smartest person in the room, it's just it's impossible. And I think I looked at some of the journey that I've been going through over the last 18 months, just trying to kind of keep up and learn, and reading books on AI and different LLM models and all things that way. And I can't keep up, and using all of these pieces. And so I've made peace with that. I want to lead as a learner, rather than having to feel like an expert on anything. And instead, I find we're spending a lot more time sharing articles, prompts. I think it's so exciting for me kind of right now. I don't think I've ever partnered as closely, with the technology aspect of the business and the business on things, like working hand in hand. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity and learning so much. And so, to go back to your question, like what's been the hardest thing, or, what are we trying to unlearn? And I think it's some of that leadership right now is just being more of a learner, and doing it actually as a collective, and hoping to create that space for yourself for vulnerability, with the team, and also for others to kind of come forward, because regardless of where someone might be, with the change or how they're feeling about how fast things are moving, just helping to support people and kind of lead through that as well.
Yeah, and I love this because, this is something that comes up a lot, that like some leaders are expected to fake certainty and fake having all the answers. And, and I
Yeah.
always tell people that, I interviewed like the AI, like, gods and all, like no one knows what's happening. So if anyone sat down in that meeting and said, I know it, they're wrong. Like
Yeah.
this is a false, because, all the policymakers and everyone said there is so much unknown and we're just taking one step at a time. So I love this idea that you recognizing yourself as a learner and
Yeah.
leader,
Yeah.
it's a very good, like it create a condition for other people
Yes.
that, okay, this is the space that we can be vulnerable. We can talk about what's working, what's overwhelming, what's not working, like where the challenge is, like really like owning this uncertainty. And I think moving away from this idea that, oh, don't worry, I'm gonna bring you that certainty, or I know the answers,
Yeah.
which to your point, there's no way. Like there
Yes.
is
Yeah.
no way.
Absolutely.
I love that. I love this idea of leader learner, or leading as a learner. Like, I think that this is a great mindset, because I hear it all the time from people that experimentation is key. And
Yeah.
I think you as a leader embracing this mindset shift, moving from, oh, I need to know all the answers, to I'm really here to learn
Yeah.
everything that I can learn and figure things out with collectively with other
Yes.
people. I think
Yeah.
that's a very, like, I already feel like it's an expansive mode of
Yeah.
operation as a leader for your team.
Yeah, and it's fun. Like,
I know.
to be able to kind of sit down and unpack things and brainstorm. And I find, that that's the fun aspect of it. And I think that's where people get to kind of step up, and lean in. And to go back to, how we were talking, earlier, it doesn't necessarily need to be a title. You don't need to have all of the reps, to be, contributing. And I think that's some of the opportunities, especially for those, entering into the workforce or entering into leader roles, is that right now, not a lot of people have the reps in some of these areas. And so all ideas are welcome. All perspectives are welcome. And I think that's really where we're seeing aspects of like DEIB and inclusivity. And this is where psychological safety really shine, and what's going to be
Yes.
needed to help, our communities or organizations ourselves, like continue through this.
I love it. But I mean, I have to also give kudos to you guys for like really embracing it as a higher management, so that, you create that, you invite that participation for like everyone to be part of this game. So, another question that I would love to ask you is around pivoting and changing, because we're talking a lot about reskilling, reinvention, like upskilling, like the fact that every single one of us needs to continue to learn. You mentioned this idea of, continuous learning and being curious. Like, what was the moment that you had to go through a certain pivot or change? And how did you manage it? Because I think that this is the other thing, that we need to be comfortable with change. We need to become comfortable with pivoting all the time, because this will be our reality at least for a few years, or maybe forever. So I want to know if you have any examples of
Yeah.
moments that you had to go through a major like transformation or transition, and how you managed it.
Yeah. There's a few things that kind of come to mind, and I think a significant one that I still kind of rely on, some lessons, and some things from that example. I was working for a large organization, and absolutely loved the company and the people that I worked with, and the work that we did, and unfortunately, they were acquired, and had been through some smaller, kind of acquisitions and opportunities, but not on the opposite side before. And so it was a great opportunity for the organization. Unfortunately, with that, there were some areas of the business, in our Canadian operations, that were not going to be part of the acquisition. So in the role that I was in, I assisted, with some of these conversations, and the transformation and what that was going to look like, from leadership development and capability to some of the reorganization. Why this was a significant and pivotal moment for myself is that, because at the time I was pregnant. And I knew, that upon return from mat leave, I also was not going to have a role to return to.
Wow.
And so, big life moment, big change. And so, as I'm working with, the organization and delivering this news, knowing that, this news was also for myself, it's probably been one of the most humbling experiences, of my life and career, to kind of work through that. And I think why this impacted me so much is because, what it left me with is how generous and thoughtful and kind an organization is through such transitions is super important, and they were,
Hmm.
in all aspects. And then I think it was my own vulnerability, which I'm not going to lie to you, at times absolutely kind of came through, being able to lead through that and help to lead others, and the teams through that. I think really showed up, and assisted both them and myself through that. And so I've always, taken some of those with me. Again, allowed me to pull some strings and kind of move on to other adventures after, and continue working with such incredible people as I did. I'm still so grateful, for the absolute opportunity. But yeah, I think, how you treat someone really shows a company's values,
Yes.
and that's always stuck with me, and that was absolutely demonstrated the whole way through. And then being able to lead someone regardless of the position that you're in as well. Yeah.
And I love this, it's really resonating, because this is, Jen, what I'm hearing all the time, that so many leaders are now integrating AI without necessarily knowing that if that AI or that technology will replace their positions. Like,
Yeah.
there are so many leaders out there and say that, what, I need to go through this transformation with my team, lead through it, navigate this change, not knowing if we will survive it ourselves. But that idea that, you also, even though you knew that you were not going to
Yeah.
stay and there would not be any place for you to come back to it, you still do your best and
Yeah.
lead the team with. I think that also is extremely important, that you are building capacity and your identity as a leader as well. Because,
Yes.
this is what I'm hearing all the time from younger leaders, that, what, it's really challenging to work on something that might obsolete you. Like, this
Yes.
is a very challenging position, and then lead a team through it that they might also put them out of work. But I guess, like, your example is like a very, like, it's a very good example of, you show your integrity to work, the
Yeah.
company take care of you, you do this, finish this project, and you move on, or like whatever that next step is gonna, like that next string, to your point, is gonna look like. We don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like in that example, there was role elimination in aspects like that. And that's where values and I think like human centric approaches and
For
safety,
sure.
psychological safety and all that absolutely shine through. But it's interesting just to build upon, some of the AI, hesitancy and concerns around that. And, you know, some of the things I try to lead with is that whole notion of human in the loop. And I think staying like, AI, will not replace you as a person. And those human aspects that we have remain
Exactly.
even more critical and elevated to right now. There are absolutely, I think, tasks and aspects
For sure.
of roles, and so that will absolutely need to be kind of looked at to see what makes the most sense, for human versus AI. And I know you spend a lot of time around agency, and I think that's where agency comes into play to say, okay, how are you going to control how you may be looking at upskilling or the future,
Yes.
and how you can learn to work with it and elevate and bring ideas forward to help organizations do as well.
Yes. And and I love like what you're sharing, because what I see also more and more is that exactly the importance of those human capacities and our human expertise, like,
Hmm.
the skill set that we have. And I think exactly to your point, we need to have agency around the technical side to understand what we can do, how we can reinvent yourself, and what we can learn to work closely with technology. But at the same time, I think improving your human skills is never wasted. And
Yes.
and I see sometimes psychological safety as your strategy as a leader or as an individual contributor, as that, like, the software that you can have. We
I
can
love
have a
that.
lot of
Yeah.
AI as a software, but psychological safety would be our software to
Yeah.
build those human skills and those human connections.
Yeah. Agreed.
I
Absolutely.
love it. So tell me, Jennifer, you work with a lot of younger leaders. Like, there are some stuff that I'm hearing from them in terms of the challenges that they're facing, but what are the challenges that they have? And what are the desires that you're hearing from them? Like, what do they want? How do they want to change the world? Like, what are you hearing from them?
I think there's so much, we've chatted a lot about, leadership and some of the more challenges and opportunities for folks. Absolutely, I think regardless of where anyone is in their leader journey, it's such an interesting point of time that we're at right now, because you're faced with this notion that you need to both perform and transform at the exact same time. And I think, for folks, that may be newer in their journey and haven't necessarily had all the reps, or folks that have been in a leader, or a technical leader for many times, and doesn't have all the reps. Like, these are just the new ways that we're working through. I think there's been elements of time in history before where this has been presented, so I'm confident that we are going to make it through. And I know we're going to use those, human centered skills and aspects, but to absolutely do that. But I think that's some of the aspects that we're hearing from folks is, how do I do both, and how do I manage myself through both, and how do I manage my teams through both. And so I think what I'm hearing from leaders is, hey, help me see this through. And and I think for those that are maybe in more senior roles, or in the roles that are meant to help support that, we're always not so sure either, right? And so I think starting to look at what are some of those practices and things that we can put in place. So whether it's, looking at some, what does resilience mean, change management, communication, bringing that in. And so I think that's kind of the transform and perform. And then I think the other aspect that hearing more from leaders, and folks, earlier in their careers is, how can I contribute and add value also in this time?
Mhm.
And so it goes back to some of our earlier points around how important it is to, have clarity around the role, around the goals, what are some of the strategic initiatives. And it can be complicated in a time where projects may change quickly, because now there's, a new emerging technology, or there's a new way to do it, or something else has kind of come up from a different landscape that's more important. So I think hearing more that folks need to have more continuous conversation. They need to know how they're connected into work. And I
Yeah.
think there's just more kind of conversations and support needed about, how do I navigate myself in my role in my team and in my life through some of this as well. And
Yeah.
I think we try to take a more balanced approach to health and wellness and all the aspects and career development. But there is still a little bit of that agency around, how is someone as an individual going to take that on themselves? So
Yeah.
I don't know. That was a lengthy answer, Nova. Where did we
No,
get to?
I mean, I agree with both of like that. I mean, performing and transforming is exactly what we also hearing all the time from people, and the overwhelm and the anxiety around that for sure. But one thing that is interesting that you're mentioning, and the angle that you're mentioning with is exactly the idea of how can I contribute and how can I add value, and then again in this world that the projects are changing all the time, and there's so much like this is actually an interesting, like, it's a challenge, but it's a very real challenge that I want to add value, but things are changing, so I'm not sure, like, I start a project but that project is evolving, or I'm just put on something else because that's where I can just be more effective. Like this, I can definitely feel that
Mhm.
it could be challenging for younger people because it's a different speed that
Yeah.
me and Jew, we were the same age, like we didn't necessarily have it when
Yeah.
we were starting our careers, or we were actually like taking our first roles as leaders.
Yeah.
So I can totally understand that desire to have impact and to add value, but also the fast pace of change that's happening all the time.
Absolutely. And then I can appreciate that, at times that can feel overwhelming. So, how do we bring it back to say, what are some things that are in your control? What are you getting excited about? Bringing that fun aspect, making sure that it still feels like you, it's authentic. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes too, we can spend a lot of time, maybe getting too, critical or thinking more about the challenges. And then I'm more of a glass half full. I think you probably learned that enough about me already, Nogo. And not that I try to be too rose colored glasses, but I think there's some beauty in just, being appreciative or getting excited about some of the things that are coming. Not,
For sure.
trying to, put under the carpet some things that, are scary and other things, but I tend to try to focus more on, things that I can control, things that I'm getting excited about, things that are going to bring me some joy. And when that doesn't happen, then it's probably time for a good workout or yoga class or some time with some friends and family to
I
just take
love
a step
this
away.
approach that, I talk to many leaders that it's all about we have to survive and we have to thrive this AI. And I can definitely see that they take out that what do you want to do? What are you good at? How you want to add value? Like what excites you? So that, like, just even recognizing that for other people as a leader, that's a very important aspect. And I really, I didn't like, because I can see that this is you, like, and you're just mentioning this all the time, that how can we unlock what people are good at and really leverage that during the time of change. I think that is a great leadership skill during this time. But that could be extremely helpful for people that, what, I know this is all overwhelming. Tell me what you're good at. Tell me what excites you so
Yeah.
that we can leverage, so you can add value and we can basically benefit from your potential. And
Yeah.
it's a win-win situation. I mean, I think that this is a very good learning
Yeah.
from younger leaders, because I think that we just get into this idea of doing and delivering,
Yeah.
that we don't spend that time for those conversations to take place.
Yeah, I remember Nogol, just an incredible leader. And one of the things he would say that he looked for in leaders, or when he said, he's, got, excellent leaders on his team, he said, they did a few things, but two things always stood out to me. Is one is he said, they're a good leader if their teams want to get out of bed that morning for them and come to work. So you're creating that excitement, that joy, that purpose, or that fun. And the other aspect is then that leader gets out of the way for them, to let them do that.
Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
those were two things. He was absolutely incredible mentor and leader, and someone I look up to dearly. And those are two things that always has kind
Yeah.
of stuck up as
And
well, right?
I totally agree with him. You mobilize people and you build that trust,
Oh,
and you just go.
yeah.
You just
not
you.
full. They want to know that you're there. They need help to support, but it's like, hey, you know what? You've
Definitely.
got
No,
this
no,
great
but
team. Let them.
support is like different from like helicopter, lead kind of leadership.
Yes.
I mean, Jen, obviously we can talk about this for like hours and hours, but this is almost like the end of our conversation. I wanna, basically the people that we serve, like younger people, trying to figure out navigating all this change, this idea
Yeah.
of performing and transforming.
Yeah.
What would be your final words for them that maybe you wish someone have told you, or you think that, what, this is a different time, so
Yeah.
this is what you need to leave with. What would be
Yeah.
your final words to them?
I think we've chatted about a few things, but if I were to boil it down to what has stood out for me is, one, you don't need to have all the reps to lead, especially with kind of where we're at now. The other aspect is having to know everything, and be that leader that has all the answers is for sure the old way of leading. It's connection. It's trying to get to know the business, get dialed in, build solid relationships, build a network around you, lean into those folks, be comfortable with saying I don't know, but let's find out together.
Yes.
And then I think the third one was, the leadership is not about the title. At the end of the day, it is about that influence, that network, and I think what you can accomplish. And I think those things have really kind of centered to where I'm at. And yeah, and then I guess closing it out, I think as we look to what the future kind of comes, it's leaning into human-centered skills, being authentic, trying to do as best as we can by each other in our communities. And I feel like then the rest will hopefully just come together, Nogel. I don't know.
To be honest with you, Jen, I think that, like, I mean, first of all, you have an amazing career. I think where you're at, like, it's a testament of like what you believe in leadership is the correct way. And I totally agree with you that like the future is a bit more human centered, it's a bit more vulnerable, more open, building on connection and trust in our network, and definitely on learning new technologies. Like there's no, like we never say that like you can just do and function on this side, but I
Yes.
think that this combination of soft skills or hard skills, as we used to say,
Yeah.
it's extremely key. And I think that you're definitely a great example of like a successful leader that definitely will be around in the years to come because of the capacity that you've built for yourself. So
Oh,
thank you so
well,
much,
thank
Jen.
you.
This is amazing. Thank you so much. This was exactly the landing that I wish we could have as our 30th episode. Each season is 15 episodes, so this is the 30th end of season 2, and I'm so happy that I got to do it with you to have this amazing conversation.
Well, thank you, Nogo. Congrats on ending the season. It was a privilege to be one of your guests, and enjoy.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, everyone. So, this final episode will be shared on YouTube soon, and we're gonna take some time off to plan for season 3. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.